Chapter 6. Betrayal and a Mysterious Protector. The driver took me to the door of my hotel. It was a small place near Vienna town centre. The strange decor caught my attention. Japanese-looking characters in all kinds of sexual positions having sex together. Other attention grabbers were the opera ads. I picked up a leaflet and glanced at it. Michael let me understand that he wants to take me to the opera to see tomorrow's performance. He would also show me the sights and be my guide in this his city. I felt his excitement as he told me. I asked the hotel clerk how best to get around, and he advised me. It would be possible to join a guided tour, but Michael emphasized that he wanted to guide me himself. I went to my room. There was a Kama Sutra artwork in my room like there were on the walls of the halls. It was a beautiful geisha with her lover. A little amused, I asked Michael if this was our honeymoon, and a lustful feeling of love filled my whole being. Soon after breakfast I went to town. Michael indicated where I should get off the tram. I toured the city and Michael showed me all kinds of sights. It was too early to go to the opera house, so Michael took me to a church adorned with many statues of angels. He told me it was the church of the Archangel Michael, his church, named after him. A black helicopter flew above me as I went to different places, and I felt like Michael was in it. I can't be sure about that because he didn't confirm it to me, but I felt his presence while he telepathically guided me through the city. Then I went to the Vienna Opera House. Finely dressed people had begun to gather in the main foyer. I bought a ticket and went to my place. People filled the seats, but the seat on my left, which was the last one in my row, was untaken. The opera hall became full, the lights dimmed, and the performance began. As I watched and listened to the love story that the singers performed with admirable devotion, I felt someone's presence in the chair to my left. Someone took my hand and held it on top of my thigh. "Michael," I whispered with excitement. The strong love energy that proceeded from his presence flowed over my being from him. "What do you think?" he messaged me telepathically. "So wonderful. Thank you for this, my love." And so it was. But even though classical singing had been my hobby, and I had studied it with the Japanese music maestro Hideaki Komiya, and had even performed in operas and operettas, I did not love it like I did my angel. He fully enjoyed the opera music, its message, and all the glamour it entailed. I myself concentrated more on him and his presence than I did in the performance. Before the lights came back on, Michael disappeared, and I made my way to my hotel. The black helicopter took off from somewhere nearby and buzzed at low height above me. It then disappeared into a different part of town. The time came to sign out of the hotel. I decided to ask my brother's wife, Aneta, whether I could spend a night with her brother. It was where she herself stayed whenever she was in Vienna. Aneta said first that because Marcin and his wife had taken her in as an extra, a second extra like me would be difficult. In the end they took me in as I pleaded with them. They said I could stay 1 or 2 nights. I went there by metro and got a place on a mattress on the living room floor. Aneta was there too, on another mattress. I asked Marcin if I could use his computer and he said yes. I sat by the computer and searched for messages from Michael about what to do next. He wanted to take me to the Hofburg Palace and show me its glory. I was disappointed because I wanted him to tell me that he was coming to get me. I started suspecting that he lived somewhere in the city in visible form too. The thought got me excited. Still, I would rather join the heavenly army than stay here on earth. When the siblings had gone to work, and Marcin's wife to Poland, I took the metro to Hofburg, the former palace of the Habsburg dynasty. It is an amazingly fine building standing majestically in the same place it has been for hundreds of years, surrounded by grand gardens. I went with a tour group with an English-speaking guide. But Michael went with me and highlighted what was important to know about each place. He especially drew my attention to Sissi and her glorious life as a queen. I walked the same halls as her. The gold-embossed furniture and the massive portrait of the queen brought a wealthy and powerful life to mind. "That's the kind of life I want to give you," I felt my angel whispering in my ear. "I didn't leave all my worldly possessions and follow you all the way here in order to now be enchanted by a worldly life," I pined within myself. Having traversed from room to room and from hall to hall for a while, I began to get bored with the sights. Michael noticed and wasn't pleased. Come, let me show you the wonderful view to the royal gardens from over there, the tower on the hill." A path that seemed to go on for miles through flower beds and topiaries came to a small hill with a fine pavilion to rest in. There was a tower there from which you could view the gardens and the Habsburgs' palace behind them. By this time I was tired, and when Michael asked me if I wanted a life like this, I gave him a cold answer. I wasn't interested. His disappointment blew over me like a cold breeze. I started walking to the metro, but promised to come to a certain place in the evening. He would be attending an evening concert there. I was very excited because I could be with him again. I stood in the metro carriage, holding on to a pole. Suddenly a great searing pain struck through both my kidneys like someone had shot an arrow through them. The pain was so bad, my knees buckled and I nearly fainted. I stopped breathing for a moment and the great pain struck me blind. It only lasted a moment, however, and it went as quickly as it had come. I was terrified about what it was. I felt it was a punishment for not wanting to receive Michael's promises of a wealthy life and choosing God's army instead. When I got back to the apartment, I went to the computer to hear Michael's teachings and instructions. The rotating mandala seemed to have a hypnotic effect on me. I watched the rotating motion and listened to Michael's voice. Instead of a cross, I wore a golden heart around my neck. It was a locket that contained a small piece of paper. The paper was a piece torn from a printout from the internet with Michael's name on it. I had written my name on it too. It was my dearest piece of jewellery, and I always kept it with me. It gave me physical contact with something to do with Michael. Evening drew on, and I had to go to our meeting place. After dinner with Renata and her brother, I was given to understand that I couldn't stay with them anymore. The owners of the apartment wanted to get back to their regular lives. I promised to leave the next day. Just now I had to go out. I got on the metro and went to the place Michael showed me. I went into a building that had a small hall and stage. I took a seat in the middle of a row. There weren't many people there, perhaps a few dozen. I picked up a program, and it seemed there would be a performance of classical songs. After the first singer, a young, tall and handsome man came on. Something moved inside of me, and I felt a strong connection with him. He looked me in the eye and smiled. "Michael? It can't be. Is it really you?" He sang a love song very well. Then a young, beautiful blonde woman joined him and they sang together. They left the stage and someone else came on. I was bewildered. This handsome man passed by me at some point as I sat in my seat. I felt a strong telepathic connection with Michael in his physical presence in the space. He performed under a different name, but I was completely sure it was him. It was the same voice, same appearance, same movements, same hair, same being. He came back on stage, and we looked at each other as often as we could. Love energies surged between us. Only he and I existed. The concert ended. I held the program in my hand and waited for him to come to the foyer. Then he came in the company of the woman who had sung with him. When he saw me, Michael smiled. "Could I have your autograph on my program?" I asked. "Gladly," he replied. He took the pen from me and wrote his name under his picture on the program. I looked at his hand and wondered at the unusually pale colour of his skin, which seemed somewhat unnatural. I also wondered at the shape of his hands. They were narrow and long, and his fingers in particular caught my attention. He handed me the program and the pen, smiled nicely, said something, and went out with the blonde lady after saying goodbye. Mixed feelings racked with jealousy completely overcame me. I walked to the metro in a cloud of hate, jealousy and love, all mixed up. I sat in a nearly empty metro carriage, and he and the other woman also came in. They sat a few rows down, facing me. The couple talked about something, totally ignoring me until they got off. The disappointment in my heart nearly brought me to tears. "Why did you do this, Michael?" I was angry. When I got back to the apartment, I looked at his picture in a notebook and felt him trying to calm me down with explanations and assurances that all was well. The next day I should come to Vienna Central Park, where he would come and get me. The jealousy eased off a bit. Being close to him in his lap convinced me that he still loves me, and tomorrow we would be together. In the morning I thanked Marcin for everything and said goodbye. I packed my bags and handbag and went out. My angel told me where to go, and that I should throw my bags in a bin. So I went to some dumpsters in a courtyard among the apartment blocks and threw all my belongings in there, including my passport and wallet. Wearing a thin denim jacket, I'd made my way to the Central Park, a few blocks from Marston's place. It was a beautiful day. The spring sun was nice and warm. People began to come and sit on the park benches and gather on the paths. I walked around and looked at everything around me. I was hungry and thirsty, but full of hope, because today was the day. Today I would be with my love. The sun began to set, and the number of people in the park grew less. I understood that he wouldn't come where he could be seen. The helicopter flew above me again a few times, and there was the telepathic connection between us. I was almost completely alone in the park, and it would close for the night. I considered what to do. Then I remembered a part of the park that was more or less in its natural state. The vegetation was so thick that I could hide there until Michael came. I went to the fence and climbed over it, landing in the midst of wild plants. I found a suitable hideout at the base of a thick tree and sat down. The cold made me shiver, and weakness from hunger drained my strength. I heard men's voices, and when I took a look through some bushes, I saw a guard approaching the path that went by the fence. Then a large flock of birds appeared at the tops of the trees, and they began making a ruckus directly above me. Magpies, jackdaws, and crows hopped on the branches at the top of the tree, screaming and dropping leaves and twigs on me, as if to tell the guards there was somebody there. I got a fright and glanced in the direction of the guards' voices. Then the birds began diving towards me like angry living missiles, flapping their wings and screaming near me. The guards turned back towards me, talking amongst themselves and observing the birds' strange behaviour. But when they didn't spot me, they left, and all the birds disappeared at the same time. I could see the first star from between the branches above me, and it twinkled at me from the heights. As night came and darkness fell, the air got considerably colder. Sounds around me quieted, and soon it was completely silent. I looked at the clear, starry sky and waited for Michael to tell me what next. I got up from my hideout and went back over the fence the same way I had come. I walked alone along the paths in the park, and even though it was late, the sky lit the area so that I felt like I was in the middle of some stage giving a performance. It was a performance in real life, and the park and the sky formed the stage. The light from the sky was of high quality, and the spotlights were directed at me. I was the only solitary actress, and the script was mostly unknown to me. And the audience? Yes, who was watching this performance? The number of stars in the sky exceeded every record number I had seen. I sat on a park bench and looked up to see what would happen next. The cold seemed to go through my clothes and to my bones. Hunger and cold tore at me. Looking at the sky, I saw something begin to happen. Some stars clearly changed place. I had difficulty understanding their movements because they moved around relative to each other and didn't come closer to Earth. Finally, one of them began to approach the Earth, and I felt it was Michael. He had come sufficiently close to be clearly larger than the others. My heart moved. Now he was coming. But suddenly a star that came at speed from the side caught up with him, and they seemed to crash into each other. Sparks flew, and Michael's descent was halted. I watched the events like some sci-fi movie that was not to my liking because he still hadn't managed to come down. This would have been such a good spacious spot outside the deeply sleeping city. I felt desperate. I lay down on the hard park bench and told Michael that if he doesn't come, I will die right here. At least then I could be with him in the heavenly army. It was nearing the early hours of morning. I sat there shivering and having given up all hope. Then someone came to me and wrapped me in an invisible, wonderfully warm blanket. Whoever it wasn't Michael. The light and the love that I felt emanating from him were like something from another sphere. I felt like soothing balm had been placed on my sore wounds. His warmth and care for me reminded me of fatherly love. It was unconditional and gentle, with no agenda or lust. I had never before experienced anything like it. I kept sufficiently warm to make it through the night. Somehow I managed to gather my thoughts enough to think to walk to a public toilet nearby to hide, because the guards would soon be opening the gates. I crouched on the toilet floor and gathered patience to wait for the gates to be opened. I heard some sounds, and when I glanced out, I saw the gates were open. I quickly slipped out and made my way to Marcin's apartment. I rang the bell by the door downstairs. I was unsure about whether he would have left for work already or not. He answered and hurried downstairs. "What are you doing here, Renata? Look at you! Where are all your things?" I didn't know what to say. Marcin told me in an angry and worried voice that I need to get washed, eat and go to bed. He would go looking for my things in the dumpster because the rubbish truck hadn't been yet. Then he would have to go to work, but when he got back he would arrange a ride to Poland for me. After having slept for a while and regained some strength, I went to look for the rest of my things myself, which Marcin hadn't found. The worst part was that my passport was nowhere to be found. I opened the computer to get an answer from Michael for what happened last night. He let me understand that he had been prevented from arriving, but that I should remain in Austria. Marcin began to arrange for my return to Poland already while he was at work. He asked different bus drivers if anyone would take me to Poland without a passport, but all of them feared trouble at the border if the bus was stopped for any reason. "It would mean going to prison," Marcin explained. He also called my father at his work and they began to arrange for someone to come get me. But that would take longer because they were near Warsaw at the time. I knew that I was causing worry and sorrow for everyone, but the only thing that concerned me was the fact that the previous night's plans had failed. I decided to visit that park one more time. I felt I would get to meet Michael there. "A driver has agreed to take you on," Marcin told me. "You leave around 5 o'clock. Don't go and disappear." "I have to go and walk over there one more time to say goodbye," I replied. "Yes, but remember to be here when the bus comes," Marcin emphasized. "Yes, I'll be back by then," I promised. The park was bathed in lovely spring sunshine, and there were people everywhere enjoying the weather. I walked through the park gates. After a short way, I felt that Michael was there because I felt someone's gaze following me. I glanced to my left. There were people sitting on the grass and a short distance away, a little separate from the others. A couple lay on their stomachs, leaning on their elbows. I glanced at them and they watched my every move. It was Michael. He was the same person I had met at the concert and the same woman was with him. But now they did not exude joy or satisfaction, but bitterness and even hate. It was like I had done something bad to them. In addition, they looked much older and uglier, like they had aged 20 years in a couple of days. I was surprised, not so much at their appearance because I knew Michael could take on any form he wanted, but at the hate emanating from him now. It was like it was my fault that my leaving with him had failed. I turned around and went back to Marcin's apartment. My head was racked with confused feelings and thoughts. What should I do? Michael demanded I stay, but the others want me out of here. What should I do? As I got nearer to Marcin's apartment, I saw the bus waiting for me. "Where were you?" Marcin called out. "Get in quick! I will bring your things and you can go now." He told the driver, "Keep an eye on her so she doesn't go anywhere." A moment later I was on the bus and Marcin gave the driver strict instructions to keep an eye on me and take me to my door. Once we had gone a few blocks, I felt relief from my anxiety about having to leave Austria despite Michael wanting me to stay. I accepted the fact that I just plain had to go back to Poland. My mother received me home with tears. I knew that I had caused her heartache, but it was about my life only, a life I wanted to live my way. I retreated to my room, but I knew that they would be keeping an eye on me. And now it was Mother's responsibility to do that. The next morning Michael had words with me. He was still angry with me for leaving Austria. I dressed nice, ate a little and meditated. Suddenly I felt Michael's strong presence in the room. Unfortunately, he wasn't emanating love energy, but bitterness and hate. I felt him grab me powerfully and throw me on the bed and generally handle me aggressively. I was like a light rag doll in his violent grip. "Michael, what are you doing? Why? What have I done wrong? You didn't come. I was waiting for you. Why?" I shouted in pain and inner fear. Tears flowed down my cheeks. "Will you do what I want you to do now?" he asked me telepathically. "Yes. What do you want me to do?" "Take the car and come to where I guide you this afternoon." Then his presence disappeared. I cried in my bed for a while until I heard the sound of an airplane. It brought to mind the helicopter I had heard in Austria. Now I was overtaken with fear and confusion. I went out on the balcony to see where the noise was coming from. A small plane flew low above our house and disappeared behind the eastern hill. "Michael!" I called out. I was confused. My love for him hadn't yet completely died, but neither was it what it had been before. Fear and anxiety had also crept into the love. A moment later I heard the plane again. It came back from behind the hill and continued west after circling by our house. He's got time to visit Austria, I thought, before it's time for our date. A little while later I took my father's car and started driving in good time. I understood that Michael wants me to be in Siskovice by evening on the Witch's Rock. I was afraid that someone might stop me going, so I left earlier in order to drive in a different direction to hide. I suspected that Mother might send someone looking for me, and my date with Michael wouldn't happen. I drove along a country road through fields and then forest. I turned the car around to face the direction I would be going and got out and walked in the forest. I had driven close by some houses, so it wasn't an area lacking in habitation. There are few places of wilderness and sparse habitation in Poland due to great population density. I walked up a forest path and looked at the nature around me. The path went up a relatively steep hill, so I just stopped. The atmosphere was not like before. The forest roused an anxious fear inside me, like someone who wanted to hurt me was lurking there. I went back to the car and sat inside. Someone passed by, leading their cows home from pasture and wondering at the person just sitting in the car. Then it began growing dark, so I drove closer to Siskovice. If someone was looking for me, at least now they wouldn't see the car or the license plate, I thought. I parked in a lot in Bogoniewice and asked Michael what time he wanted me to be at our destination. He told me 11 o'clock. I figured he was going to descend to earth there. Well, it does have a large car park, and there won't be any tourists at this time of night. The place was familiar to me because I had often meditated on the Witch's Rock. I experienced an unusually strong flow of energy fields from that rock. Often I also bottled water flowing over those rocks, which was popular for its special healthy qualities. The area as a whole is called Skalki. I had only good memories of that place. My mother's tale of somebody trying to strangle and rape her there also came to mind. It was 11:15, so I started the car and drove towards Skalki. As I drove, I watched the sky and saw only a few stars. I parked the car in the parking lot and looked around me at the sky. There was no one. I was disappointed because I had expected his plane or his helicopter to be there, but I could see nothing. Something drew me up towards Witch's Rock. I told Michael that if he wasn't there at exactly 11 o'clock, I would turn back and go home. Next, I was to go towards a dark path that led into some woods. The street lights that lit the parking area made the place look more or less safe. But the area where I was supposed to go didn't feel good. No, I won't go there. I turned around and quickly got in the car. I drove home at speed, and now all I could think of was my mother and her sorrow. She might have been looking for me, and her heart was not well. All I could think of was my mother. God, I prayed, don't let my mother's heart fail out of sorrow. When I got home, I saw that Mother had fallen asleep in front of the TV with it still on. She was sound asleep. Thank God, I thought. Are you asleep, Mother? I asked, having entered the bedroom. My mother snapped awake. Oh, I must have dozed off. Where have you been? Driving around, I replied. I left my mother there, grateful that she was fine, and retired to my room. But Michael was not pleased. A threatening, pressuring atmosphere met me in my room, which was our bedroom. I felt his displeasure towards me. I switched the lights off, and darkness fell into the room. I tried to sleep, but every time I was about to fall asleep, I felt evil forces hounding me. I placed the picture of angel couples around me on the bed. Archangel Michael, protect me, I said in an official tone. I closed my eyes, but then monstrous apparitions attacked me from the darkness. I got a fright and switched the light on. I wondered what this was. I could feel inside me that these creatures were trying to get to my heart, and somehow I knew that if they succeeded, I was a goner. My Kundal was in full strength, for I could feel the energies moving from my tailbone to my head. Energy and power simply radiated into my head and, for some reason, it was where the creatures were. Or, more accurately, I could feel their presence in my whole body except my heart. My heart was the only place they had not accessed, but were doing all they could to get there. I fought for my life like this every night. I couldn't sleep. When I walked and meditated, Michael often drew me towards the next hills, saying he would take me with him from there. I followed him when he moved in the sky. But every time I thought I had caught up with him, he moved on and I returned home. One night, as I was trying to go to sleep, I noticed a bright bluish-purple light shining into my room from outside. Then a bright flow appeared under the balcony door. The light was very bright and something like a white fog followed it. I got a fright and considered for a moment what it might be. I thought it might be a spaceship. The dogs barked madly as they had done every night recently, but now even more. And I heard inexplicable noises on the roof, like some creature with long nails was running there. An inexplicably evil presence followed these nightly noises on the roof. I looked to where the light had come from, and it was gone. I got up and walked to the balcony door. I looked out, but I could see nothing. No one. A strong force drew me out walking again. I walked straight through the neighbours' fields. I followed the star again. It always moved away when I got close, so I went back home. The nights got worse and I couldn't sleep. A force overcame me and made my whole body shiver and twitch like it was an epileptic fit. At the same time, my face twisted into strange grimaces. I could no longer sleep alone. I told my mother about my fits and asked to sleep with her. She saw my miserable form and was glad to help. When my father was away, I slept in the bed with my mother. When he was home, I slept on the sofa bed in their room. We prayed in the evening on the bed that I would be able to sleep. We asked God and Mary for help, but nothing seemed to work. When I writhed in bed, my mother was terrified and didn't know what to do. She got up and leaned on me with her whole weight, crying and praying in an effort to keep me in place. When I finally fell asleep in the small hours of the morning, a bird would wake me with its song. It felt like torture. The sound seemed to come from underground and straight into my brain like a sharp knife, tearing my head from the inside with unbearable pain. I tried to put a pillow over my ears, but the sound came through. And the bird just went on and on and on. Tiu, tiau, tiau, tiu, 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 tiut. And every tiu was like a knife stabbing through my brain. I couldn't sleep at night, so I tried to sleep during the day in the sun. But for some reason, this energy-giving, wonderfully soothing sun now became a roasting frying pan, hateful and distressing. I went in the shade, but when I closed my eyes and was about to sleep, I saw myself lying at the bottom of a grave underground, in the midst of tree roots and the trees growing above me. I couldn't be anywhere. It was unbearable. So when my mother suggested consulting a psychiatrist, I agreed gladly. The doctor prescribed medication that I started taking immediately, but the effect was such that I began to see bloody visions. Now the epileptic type fits came on during the day as well. I would writhe and twist on the grass when I tried to rest. I was at the end of my tether. I had no strength left to fight. I felt my life slipping away. I was completely abandoned. Even though people who were dear and close to me tried their best to help me, I saw that I had no contact with heaven. God had abandoned me just as Michael had done. Now I began to suspect that Michael might not be who he claimed to be. Why did he mistreat me like that towards the end? Why didn't he help me now? Where is he now? On the other hand, my only objective now was to survive this regardless of him. It was the end of May. The 3 months I had been in Poland had mostly involved anxiety, fear and battles that were drawing to an ill-fated conclusion for me. I was depressed and disappointed with everything my whole life. The final fiasco of seeking truth and love was raising a flag of victory. I had lost. Now I could take only small breaths and I felt like a fish on dry land. When I went to the market in town where there were lots of people, I felt completely different to everyone else. The sounds of the market felt like they were coming from underground. Or was it me underground, even though I was at the marketplace? It was like I was in the courtyard of hell at the same time. I walked as if in two places at the same time, and I was afraid that soon I would see and feel ever less of this world, and that other world will completely take over, and some day I would remain underground. My brother Thomas' wife Agnieszka came for coffee as she was used to do. My mother once again expressed her concerns for me. I myself had to make a huge effort to even be there. Agnieszka glanced at me and asked me whether I would like to talk to a priest. I figured I had nothing left to lose. I agreed, and she was immediately ready to take me to the monastery church in Chuchawa or the building beside it if there was no one in the main building. There would be a priest on duty there. When we got to the monastery, Agnieszka requested to speak with a priest. In the waiting hall, I saw Jesus on the cross, but it had no effect on me. One of the priests agreed to see me. I sat down by a large meeting table where the priest was doing some paperwork. He put the papers aside and asked me what I wanted. I told him I had left Jesus and Catholic religion out of my life and was now in great distress and suffering. Having spoken with him for a while, I made confession, confessing my sins. Then he asked me whether I would like to have Jesus back in my heart. Without hesitation, I said I do. For some reason, I took this question literally. Having lived in the invisible world, I knew that we were talking about a person whom we need to approach with an attitude of reality. He, Jesus, was now real. As the priest continued to pray, I bowed my head and tears flowed from my eyes. And at that moment I saw Jesus on the cross. I no longer heard the priest's voice, but suddenly I was in a dark place where there was no one but Jesus and me. I looked up at him on the cross. I saw him from the waist up. His face was full of bruises and wounds that were bleeding. His chest and arms were the same, his arms sideways, nailed to the cross. One eye was swollen shut, and the other one looked at me. His look was so full of amazing love that my heart melted before him. He had a crown of thorns on his head, which had sunk deep into his scalp, and the drops of blood kept flowing from the wounds made by the thorns. I looked at him and cried. I was small and miserable before him, and so sorry about rejecting him before. But he just looked at me and loved me with a great love. Suddenly a drop of blood from under the crown of thorns dropped on my cheek, and then another. At the moment they touched my skin, a great power full of love took away all my anxiety, all my sins. For the first time in a long time, I filled my lungs with air. Jesus' drops of blood became absorbed in my skin. I felt someone pulling me away from the depths of the earth to above it. I was left as if suspended in the air a few centimeters above the earth. An overwhelming happiness, joy and light feeling and gratitude overcame me. At that moment I felt I was at Calvary. And even though the dark clouds surrounding the cross of Calvary hung behind and above Jesus and the cross, and darkness surrounded us, I was full of wonderful, amazing light and weightlessness. Jesus was the wonderful, pure love that had protected me in the park in Austria. My mysterious helper had been Jesus. He had not left my side, even though I had rejected him. This Lord, Jesus, I will never give up, and I intend to stay close to him, as close as I can. The vision vanished, and after we had exchanged a few more words with the priest, we went out. I wanted to attend Mass and take communion. Agnieszka was as happy and excited about my sudden change as I was, and she was glad to take me to Tarnow City Church. I also spoke with a nun about these things, and I promised to bring her a notebook containing all manner of love letters and drawings that I had made for Michael. I was so happy, free, light and grateful that I didn't want to disappoint Jesus anymore. Instead, I wanted to be obedient to him and serve him. I considered becoming a nun and giving my life to him that way. The joy and gratitude to God was great among all our family and friends. I decided to go to church and to communion every day. I had never felt like this before. All my yoga and meditation seemed dumb and even scary compared to this. I understood that these were two worlds at enmity with each other that can agree on nothing. There is a war between them, a war over souls.